Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. Yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but nobody introduced you, and so I wonder if you could introduce yourself.
Oh, minor detail. Okay. So okay. Funny. Okay, so my name is Rikki, and I'm, I guess what I would call is I'm an accidental activist out of Cordova, Alaska, after the Exxon Valdez oil spill, when I realized that these oil disasters can, the industry has pulled a fast one on all of us, and it doesn't really have all these promises, clean up equipment and everything will be fine and trust us. And then the next realization was that not only is oil all over the place and nobody's going to clean it up, but really nobody's going to help us. So all the laws that are supposedly in place, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, the Oil Pollution Act, don't work. And how did corporations get this big that they were able to manipulate our legal system, our political system? What happened? So there's the democracy component, and it just went on and on. And I will say that I did well. Okay, so actually, I wanted to start with one of the reasons I'm here is because I actually one grew up in Wisconsin, in Wauwatosa, west side of Milwaukee, and when I was 13 years old, 1967, in Wisconsin, walking to school as a middle student, birds were literally falling out of trees dying. And I mean, literally, I was walking to school and these things were just landing at my feet. So I would pick them up, these little bodies are all shaken, and I would put them under bushes to die. And one day it occurred to me to ask my father, why was this happening? Birds aren't supposed to fall out of trees. So I asked Dad, and instead of making me feel better, he put my hands together, and the birds were everywhere, these robins, and he put a dying bird in my hand and explained the neurotoxin DDT. And then he gave me Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, which I read the summer I turned 14, and I was so amazed that a person could know so much about something, but share it in a way that was inspiring and motivating for people like my father, who I saw as a 13, 14-year-old ordinary paper salesman. My dad went on to sue the state of Wisconsin over the use of DDT, and that's why DDT was banned now nationwide. It's because of my dad. And I saw this whole I saw this whole battle unfold in the house because Dad was raising money, and we had the lawyer and the biologist. There was one of each. Staying at our house, and all his kids got crammed into one bedroom. So this is definitely like a memorable experience. And Dad won, and the lawyer and the biologist would be practicing their arguments every night when they were going to court. So the whole thing was cool, and I was like, okay, you can feel the brain power, right, and change happening, and people empowered, right? And I just thought, I want to be part of this. And it sort of falls in the category of be careful what you ask for, okay? So I went off to school to find an ocean. I had to go find an ocean. I wanted to be a marine biologist like Rachel Carson. So East Coast, West Coast, and eventually graduated with a master's and doctorate in marine pollution because that's what was going through the sort of the research attention in the through the 70s and into the early 80s. The Torrey Canyon tanker spill had happened in England, 68, 67. We got our first national contingency plan in 68. 4 months later, we had the Santa Barbara well blowout in 69. The contingency plan didn't work. And as a result of the popular movement that was rising and it's kind of spilled into the streets in the 70s, we had 18 new federal agencies form and EPA form. And one of the laws that went through, and it's here, this is our bit of blue, okay? Our bit of blue is 20 years. Civil rights movement leading into the environmental movement, leading now, I believe, into the environmental justice movement, and a merging of the environmental movement and the environmental justice movement. And what you'll see with this timeline is that yellow is a victory for corporate persons in terms of rights or powers increasing, and blue is an increase for people. And when there's enough wall space for this thing, what you see is kind of every time there's a bit of blue, there's a pretty big corporate backlash. But this is also an indication of how our democracy got hijacked, this corporate personhood that we hear about, this corporate constitutional rights. And the last time, a few nights ago, when I did this timeline in Indiana, I think I was, it actually, or Chicago was the workshop, it actually took 3 hours to do, because each of these has, for example, why would I have put Constitution in yellow? Each of these has the case law or the case summary of it in the back. So the ensuing discussion just goes, this is this is not taught in civics classes. It's not taught in high school yet. There are high schools that are very interested in this. And I've had lawyers sit in about somewhere around, 1920s, the lawyer will say, I never was taught any of this in law school. So this is what happened to our democracy. Constitution's in yellow because of the little 3/5 of a person. Anything that's in yellow is a diminishing of human rights, okay? So, or it's a diminishment of government of for and by the people, okay? So 3/5 of a person, this is no. And it's really a property and commerce document if you read it. Supposedly balanced by the Bill of Rights, but even if you look at that, that took away rights of New Jersey women who already could vote. So, and I think I've added to this every time, usually I give it, like the concern a couple years ago was eminent domain. How did we get this eminent domain business? Well, let me start with the first concern. All right, eminent domain. So eminent domain is a combination of Dillon's rule in 1907. Why don't you just read
The
this?
face of occupying the street.
Hunter versus Pittsburgh, 1907. The Supreme Court sanctioned Dillon's rule, maintaining that municipalities have no rights that are not specifically granted by the state legislature. Dillon's rule is used in 39 states to divest people of local governing authority and to preempt people from adopting a law to protect health, safety, welfare, and the environment from corporate assaults committed by the state.
So, in other words, this is one part one. In other words, in our government by consent, what we did was we said, here's our structure. We have people who are supreme, operate in the private sphere, and have rights. And we are sort of standing on top of our government, which is supposed to be transparent, operate in the public sphere, and have duties that we task it. And corporations were originally down there as well, all right? Corporations existed. East India Tea Company, Hudson Bay Tea Company, I mean, there were already corporations that were chartered to the King of England, and they existed. So we said we wanted to be in charge of those corporations too. So this whole yellow and blue tension is a striving by these artificial entities that are business models to become recognized as persons under the law and then to get the same rights as people, okay? Yes.
I'm sorry to break it. I'm colorblind. Are there any colors up there besides yellow and blue?
Yellow is on the bottom, blue
Yep.
is on the top.
And that's all?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And so part of this here, I'm not going to go into this in detail, this is all posted at ultimatecivics.org under the resource button under timeline, all right? But I do want to highlight that that what happened here, let's take it up to here, 1868. So how many of you have heard of Citizens United lawsuit? Yeah? The one that all of a sudden corporate person fell out onto the street, right?
Right.
Okay, so Howard Zinn said, I don't understand what people are getting so excited about. This has been going on for 200 years, right? So this is what he was referring to. In our Constitution, it uses the word person 46 times, but it never distinguishes between artificial persons or artificial entities and natural persons or human persons. Okay? And if you read the Constitution, it's pretty clear that when it says person, it means a living, breathing human person. Okay? It talks about Indians, it talks about people, it talks about citizens. So at any rate, the word person, one of the times it pops up is in 1868, which is the 14th Amendment to intended for black males and making them citizens of the United States, but also granting them, here, black males, okay, quote, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process, okay, of the law, nor shall any person deny within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So there's the word person, okay? Equal protection of the law. So what happened in the 20 years after this passed was that there were 307 lawsuits brought. 18 by African American men, because it wasn't exactly working the way they intended. 1 by women, trying to get equal protection under the law. If it applied to African American men, why not us? So in 1874, the court said, no, it does not apply to women. And then 12 years later, it says, but it does apply to corporations. 19 by natural persons, the other 288 by artificial persons trying to become equal to us under the law, okay? So this is basically the genesis for the Citizens United, all right? And what happened, remember that little platform I made where people are superior to corporations and our government? What happened was by a stroke of basically by a header in this decision, the corporate person, which is down here, became equal to us, okay? So now we're both over the government. But the trouble is our laws work this way. They work up and down because laws are supposed to protect us, living, breathing people, from the tyranny of a centralized government. But they're not supposed to work this way because we're all supposed to be equal. Supposed to be on equal playing field, duking it out equally under the law, okay? So this just completely discombobulated things. Then we roar along here and we've got, okay, Dillon's rule. The other one that goes with that is this corporate right for compensation in easier. I think. Okay. Basically, I'm not the one that. This is the one. Okay, so it's this one. Okay, should we have a different reader this time? This is all leading up to.
Is it something I can pronounce? Lachner in versus New York, 1905. The ruling allows federal courts to regulate economic activities as protected constitutional rights under the doctrine of substantive due process. Lachner became shortened for using the Constitution to invalidate government regulations of the corporation. From 1905 until the mid-1930s, the court invalidated approximately 200 economic regulations, usually under the due process clause of the 14th Amendment.
So basically, again, eminent domain. What's going on here is the laws that we pass to protect worker health, public safety, public health, the environment. If you're going to insist that you want a better pipeline because it's not going to spill as much, so you want the extra strength steel, okay? if you're going to say, oh, these refineries that are refining the tar sands oil and producing this petcoke, the incinerators are polluting. The petcoke ash is flying away. We want you to tarp the petcoke piles. We want you to put a scrubber on to take the pollutants out of the incinerator smokestacks before you release the air pollution, or the National Pollution Elimination Discharge NPDES permits that allow the pollutants to go out into the water. So there's air pollution and water pollution involved here. This is all supposed to be regulated, right? Well, best available technology could be end of the pipe. You have mixing zones now, which keep getting expanded. Every time the industry wants to expand its facility onshore, it's going to mean there's going to be more air pollution, more water pollution. So the mixing zone, this pipe, comes out like this, and there is a rectangular, usually, although that's not really good, it's supposed to be spherical, but anyway, body of volume of water that literally is over the water quality standards of the state. It's a legalized zone of pollution. And the theory is that at the edges of this mixing zone, it mixes with the water and then meets the water quality standards outside of the mixing zone. You all got that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so every time it expands, this is what happened to us in Alaska. Do they put in better equipment here to reduce the pollution? No, they ask for more of our public water body to be polluted. Okay, so this is just one example of saying that, hey, the industry can now say, I'm sorry, but we can plead the Fifth Amendment. We have a right to takings. Your environmental laws are going to cost us money to comply with them. Your worker safety laws, your human health, your public health laws, those smokestacks, those best available technology. So that's a taking of our future profit. So you have to compensate us. That's what we're talking about, invalidating government regulation, okay? We should be standing on all this, but our laws are broken. Basically, the yellow laws are broken laws. All right, so here's another one, compensation, corporate right to compensation for regulatory takings. That's what I was just talking about. And it's, anyway, eminent domain. Okay, so now we get to here, and the problem with here was the people rose up. And we made a significant amount of demands, and we got changes, and there's a ton of laws that got passed in the 1970s. But what happened here was the states were not regulating pollution properly. Okay, that was the burning rivers and all this other stuff. So the federal government said, basically, okay, we'll take it on. And there were 3 regulatory agencies up to this point. There were 18 suddenly afterward. The net effect of that was, instead of one state saying, we've got a problem here with you, polluter, and each corporation having to fight this individually, now the it was to the advantage of the corporations to say, hey, oil industry across the United States, hey, Monsanto and food producers across all the corporations dealing with this, let's team up. Okay? Let's team up and fight the regulation. That's not the only thing that happened. There's something that 1971. How many of you have read? I forget Dylan. Powell Memo, 1971. It's really worth Googling and reading. Okay, it's only 12 pages long, and it was written in response to our what we call democracy. Okay. And it was before Lewis Powell made a bid to join the Supreme Court. He wrote this as a businessman. He wrote it to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Business Roundtable. And he made this pitch that this beautiful democracy was an assault on the American free enterprise system. And we, the business community, needed to regain control of the unruly public, okay? So, and there's some great quotes in that can be turned around, okay? But basically, the argument was, he said he made a pitch that we need to take control of the courts, take control of the media, take control of the education system, and take control of the legislature. And pretty much after the 70s, I mean, basically, there's no more blue, right? This has been marching under Powell memo since 1971. This was the growth of the right-wing think tanks. This was the growth of the all the climate deniers and everything else. This was industry pooling its corporate consolidated wealth to get control of our democracy. And up until this point, the laws, the yellow case rulings, were mostly about protecting tangible property, stuff you could feel or touch, or physical property. From 1970s, mid-70s on, it's intangible property. The first four are all about freedom of speech. Okay? Freedom of speech here is, okay, this is what's contributing to Citizens United.
Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976. The Supreme Court rules that political money is speech. This ruling expanded the First Amendment's protections to include financial contributions to candidates or parties.
So this is why the Supreme Court said in Citizens United, top right, that's Citizens United, the corporate right to, we, the Supreme Court, decide that the corporations are entitled to unlimited spending in elections. Because corporations are persons under the law dating back to 1886. They are entitled to speak, and since corporate persons can't speak, they can spend money, they're entitled to spend money as speech. Because we've already said political money is speech, 1976. You put those two together, and you've got what the Supreme Court said. They actually had a quote, that we don't want to create a disadvantaged party or class by limiting freedom of speech, meaning Fortune 500 companies that couldn't spend willy-nilly, right? And while everybody was having a fit, 81% of Americans in polls said, no, 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 the Supreme Court is headed on the wrong track. And at first people thought it was about money in politics. That was just part of it. It was really about corporations having the same rights as people. That's the foundational problem. And 3 months after that, the Supreme Court, lower left-hand corner there, decriminalized money laundering. And that was the birth of super PACs. So the Supreme Court went marching to its own drummer, while 81% of the American public said, stop, stop, this is going in the wrong direction. Now, in a functioning democracy, there are 3 branches of government. And the legislative branch makes law, the judicial branch interprets the law, and the executive branch enforces the law. And if one of those 3 branches runs amok, the other 2 don't correct it, we, the people, it's up to us to fix the problem, okay? It is up to us. And I will possibly turn my computer on at the very end and give you a great set of quotes from the Declaration of Independence, which was a set of grievances that gave birth to the American Revolution. We are going to separate because, ding, ding, ding. And you can pull it right out, right now, and it applies to today. So we're given in our Constitution a way to amend it. We have done that 27 times. People made law through Congress. Well, it turns out there's a whole other way of amending our Constitution, through judge-made law, through the federal judiciary. And that has been done hundreds of times. Hundreds. So we need to, I'm considering everyone in this room is a change agent, okay? And as a change agent, that means we want to change the system, and for what we're seeing other problems, we want to fix it. And I'm beginning to think that democracy is really not an endpoint. It's a constantly kind of moving target that we're always trying to work on. So we have mistakenly challenged, well, our school children with the thought that of being a good citizen is somebody who votes.
Right.
And a lot of the schools are coming out of that sort of slumber now. And I think a large part of it actually was contributed to Occupy movement.
Good.
Because, yeah, I really think, because I teach 5th grade through university, and this didn't happen until after Occupy. But the teachers have been realizing that reading, writing, and arithmetic doesn't cut it. And I saw at the Occupy camps all these people showing up. This was partially birthed by the Occupy camps. I had it, but I didn't have it in a way that I could just really quickly do it and have everybody read something and feel like we own this. Oh, great. People show up, but then people didn't really have a clear idea, now what? You know, what to do. What do I do now? I'm here. And the first part of social change is showing up. So that was a good thing. But what I realized pretty quickly was that, oh my God, we need to get tools in the toolkit here so that we can do something besides sit in trees and march. Not that that's not good enough, but we need a lot more tools, okay? Because one of the teachings in this book, which is online, is 198 methods of nonviolent direct action. Yes, we need the tree sitters. Yes, we need the blockaders. We need a whole bunch of other stuff too, okay? And not everybody can sit in trees and blockade and chain down. So how do we, if we're movement building as change agents, how do we build that movement? How do we constantly recruit more people? What are, you know, and that is part of what maybe I'll get to today, we'll see. It's all in this. This is a 6-part training, a 6-hour training. It goes from like 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. And what block 1 is this, okay? So you take some time and you understand what our foundational problem is. There's a great Japanese proverb that says, vision without action is a nightmare. It is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. So we've got to be strategic about this. And so the second part of this training is, and it's all it's in this manual, and you can download the PowerPoints and download all this stuff. And I think I have $25 in a sliding scale, okay? It's what is a campaign? Goals, strategy, tactics, messaging. It's a lot easier with a PowerPoint. But it teaches people how to dialogue to bridge differences. And that I think is critical. Well, anyway. I think I'm going to just think about this a second. And then the last, okay, so that's a 2-hour training of these different skills, and it's all about recruiting, and it's about analyzing campaigns to say, what did I hear with the strategy? What are the tactics? Tactics being things like sitting in trees. Tactics being things like writing letters for the newspaper, like passing out flyers. There's stuff in there that everybody can do, okay? And then finally, the last 2-hour training is, part of it is either refining or building a campaign in wherever I'm at. So whatever is the burning issue, okay? So the burning issue here is pipelines and oil development, and I'm going to hop, I think, a little bit to that.
Is
Yes.
that online?
Yes, it is.
Which website?
The third one, ultimatecivics.org, because it's kind of ultimate. There's also, I will say that I'm still talking about butcher paper in here, because it was the teachers actually that said, why don't you just use the other side of that? And I went, oh, because I used to have to get a big sheet of butcher paper, anyway, and it would always fall off the wall, and like, oh. So the good news of what I want to say about the teachers is that Washington State actually passed a law requiring another half a unit of civics, specifically civics, in their American history. And when I didn't know that, and when I gave this very shortened version of this in like an hour-long presentation to the Washington State Council of Social Studies, and there are state councils all over, all right? I challenged the teachers that you're the civics teachers. why are you teaching that we have an ideal democracy when we don't? We left it a while ago. We took a little detour towards a plutocracy, okay? So, rule by the wealthy.
Yep.
Unless you teach the difference, the gap between the real and the ideal, how do we expect the students to get to to move us forward? And I just left it at that when I asked it, and all these teachers just looked at me.
How about that?
And then finally one of them said, well, I think we need to incorporate this. And another teacher jumped up and said, how many of you feel like that? And all the teachers nodded. And this is all of Washington State's teachers, right? So, and it turned out she was the supervisor, the superintendent for civics, and she was looking for content. And she goes, okay, this is what we want.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So get it in one state, we get it in other states, right? That's the idea here. So we can push back against the Powell memo and do a little bit of our own curriculum writing. So just to reassure you, I am teaching civil disobedience in 5th grade through university.
Yes.
Go Pete Seeger.
Because this is the Supreme Court says corporations are personal and limited speech. Well, anything that goes against that is civil disobedience.
Absolutely.
It could be as simple as writing a local ordinance saying, in this town of Petoskey, we no longer recognize corporations as persons under the law, right? And this is happening in state after state. And if you go to this website, here, you can go to this. There. CEL, oh, wow, look at that. CEF.org is, these are mine, just FYI, in case I write more. Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund.org. How many of you have heard of Thomas Lindsay and his democracy training? I took 3 courses and then went on and did this because I figured it's more responsive to what I felt people's needs are. You know, people ask me about eminent domain. I didn't know. I go back in the law, I find it, it's added in, right? I mean, okay. Okay, I'm good. This is another tool for you all. This is free on the website Ultimate Civics, value-based community organizing, all right? It's like 20 pages of pitfalls to avoid and 1 page of the actual exercise. Here's how this arose. It actually arose in Cordova, Alaska, after our entire community, which is a fishing town, collapsed because the fish collapsed after the Exxon Valdez oil spill. All right, so big hole in our ecosystem, fishing town with no fish. And so community immediately, and this would happen, I found this is applicable everywhere across the United States. We can pass it. Because our little economies are all based on usually several things. Well, what if one of those things goes down? That creates an incredible stressor on the others, and it also creates an incredible stress on the townspeople whose economy went down. We learned that financial stress is the #1 stressor that makes people do weird things. So the way it manifested in our town was increased spikes in suicide, domestic violence, substance abuse, divorces, right? And we became, it's all in my 2nd book on the Exxon Valdez oil spill called Not One Drop. I don't own that one, so I can't can't share it like I do with Sound Truth. Sound Truth is about the biological impacts of oil. We're going to get into that, to people, to wildlife. What we learned from Exxon Valdez, what's missing in our laws to protect us. Not One Drop is on emotional trauma. What happens when there's a man-made disaster in a town, and what breaks, and how you fix that to repair your town. And what breaks are the trust, the relationships between people, because divorces and suicides and substance abuse. People are not in their right heads, okay, when this happens. And there's somebody to sue, and then you'll find out that, hopefully not, okay, hopefully not. This is about preventative measures here. But in these big disasters, what the industry does is it says, well, I'll pay for this little subset of people, but the fishermen sell their fish to the restaurants. The fishermen buy fuel from the fuel companies. The fishermen go out to eat when there's money. but all the trickle-down effects that our fishing income had in the town won't pay for any of those other businesses. So it basically pits the town against the town, right? Townspeople against townpeople. It's really, really ugly. And and people get desperate. And, well, see, there's a couple stories here about getting desperate. I think I want to share one, even though I don't have that book. So when our town's economy collapsed, it was like the worst thing that we had imagined came true. The oil spill happened 4 years earlier. We still had fish in the 2 years afterward. The oil industry said everything's fine. Well, we were fishing fish that we didn't fish in '89 when the fishery was closed. So, but all the young of the year from '89, that's what happened. They didn't. They got killed, or their reproduction was dinged, and by 1993, so we did a blockade of Valdez Narrows. We took all of our fishing boats and blockaded a geologic bottleneck that literally held up oil tanker traffic. The oil tankers were trying to come into Prince William Sound, and they couldn't. This was before 9/11. But the point was, what drove us to that act of civil disobedience was the fact that we had nothing left to lose. And when you're in that position, it's incredibly freeing, because you almost don't care what happens to you anymore, okay? And I guess what I'm saying is the act of desperation with the abolitionists, trying to get people, come on, this slavery business is hogwash, come on. And people did things that they normally wouldn't have done, house people in their homes, running. I mean, you start recruiting people based on ethics and moral high ground, sort of. And I think to make a sort of a leap, that's where we're heading to with counting on oil for our energy future. It's becoming more and more evident to people that, okay, climate, that's kind of a big thing, and I can't really wrap around it. But if you could see how many people are sick in the Gulf right now from the oil and disbursement combined, it is ungodly. I mean, you open, one of the mothers down there tells me, you go into the school nurseries, infirmaries, and you open the cabinets, and they're just stuffed full of nebulizers. I mean, the kids can't breathe. Kids are losing hair. The dispersant dries up the sebaceous glands, right? Of birds, feathers, of river otter oil, all the oils, that's all natural oil. Your skin, okay? And so kids' hair is falling out. I had one older man tell me, well, my hair's falling out too. I said, I think it's a lot more convincing if you're 6. So it's occurring to more and more people that these aren't just tanker spills on the ocean. I've got rail cars coming through my backyard. I've got fracking going on in my backyard. My water got contaminated. I've got a gag order on me because I can't talk about this, if I want the industry to give me fresh water. And what am I supposed to do? I can't drink my water. So it's dawning on more and more people that this is maybe not such a wise, the cost is our public health. The cost is our kids' health. And the climate is out there somewhere on the horizon but the near and dear thing is, this is affecting me personally. Mm-hmm. My job, my backyard, my perfect little spot that I had on my ranch for 4 generations, right? Okay, so held that blockade, and what we wanted was science. We wanted science to show that oil, well, we were thinking that the oil had killed the young. The science was still in the lab, in little beakers, and this is still where the National Contingency Plan science is, okay? So we're going to loop that in as well. That's this blue stuff. So the fishermen came back from that blockade, and the townspeople who were part of that, we got our science. The science showed that oil is more toxic than we thought, than in the 1970s when we passed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, okay? That was the stuff that, now when you gas your car, that has a shield, right? That's the volatile organic compounds. that's kind of sweet smelling stuff. That's benzene and benzene derivatives, okay? So it finally got through to EPA that that's bad, and we put a shield. Well, an oil spill, forget the shield, all right? It's like poof, everywhere. There goes Citizens United.
Nice job.
Would that it would be so simple. Right. Okay. So that's what the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act focused on. That stuff that dissolves quickly into the water. Oil floats, right? We all used to think conventional oil? That's what the whole contingency plan is premised on, is conventional oil. Floats at sea, right? 1968, way before tar sands or frack oil, right? Now we have what the industry is calling non-buoyant oil. It sinks. Okay, but so in 1970s we had the floating oil, and the stuff that dissolved into the water columns, same stuff that went up into the air. Benzene, it's a narcotic, carcinogen. What the oil science from the Exxon Valdez proved was that there's a whole other fraction of oil. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. And the thing is that that's the black stuff that's left on the beaches. That black stuff gets inside of vertebrates. So birds, fish, mammals, people, and it jams cell function. So it's an endocrine disruptor. It jams reproductive function. It jams a function of production of respiratory enzymes. So it makes it hard to breathe. You can't. Your blood doesn't grab the oxygen. It's immune suppression. It stunts growth. Especially it stunts growth and development of the first trimester of things. So what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico right now? Dolphins been aborting, miscarrying young, I guess you'd call it, losing their babies at record 6 times the 10-year average. Okay, this is still ongoing now. People as well. These data haven't come out yet, but they're public. So there's a whole host of symptoms like that. But back to that. So that science came out and it's settled. I think where I want to tie that in before I forget is that the tar sands oil is concentrated, it's heavy oil. It's concentrated in these PAHs. In other words, it's innately more toxic by itself than conventional crude. Okay? And tar sands oil, you can't ship it without diluting it. Diluting it, you use a thinner. The thinner is a diluent. The thinner is a petroleum. It's a petrochemical. It's very similar to dispersants by nature. It has to be. It thins the oil. It's the same stuff that's in the frack oil. Yeah, the frack chemicals that are put down to extract the Bakken shale and other, it dissolves the oil from the rock formations. These are all petroleum solvents, petroleum-based solvents. And they're the light ends of the oil, more like the VOC end, okay? So with tar sands oil, what I'm saying is it's almost like having oil and dispersant pre-mixed. You've got the worst of 2 worlds. And the solvents act like an oil delivery system, pulling the oil into your body. So oil plus these solvents are way worse than oil will, all right? So science aside, the other big lesson from Exxon Valdez was how to work together. And this is kind of what I think where we're at now as movement builders is, okay, well, here we all are, but we all agree what we're trying to do, right? So the idea is to have more in bigger towns and be more like a neighborhood meeting, where it's a big neighborhood, but in smaller towns, you can try to have a community meeting. So how big is Petoskey, anyway?
It's pretty small. It's probably between 6,000 and 8,000 people.
Okay, all right. So what we did, this exercise is all about getting people to the table. So we had an economic meltdown in Cordova. And part of the town wanted to clear cut, because that would put money on the table right now. Part of the town wanted to strip mine for the coal, that would put money on the table right now. We didn't know when our fisheries was going to back. So the other half of the town said, hey, we don't live here for that, and crash, okay? So the idea was, as long as people are polarized, and what does that sound like? It sounds like, to me, red and blue states. It sounds like the corporate-owned media is constantly trying to swirl us. And as long as we're in a swirl, we're actually disagreeing about this much. The rest is like what we agree on, but nobody knows that because they're so focused on, the little bit we disagree on. So what we had to do, the challenge at Cordova was to figure out how to get everybody at the table, all right? Because if we, as one group, did a problem solving and came up with a solution and put it out there in the public, it would get hit by the other groups that didn't see their needs being met in that solution. And that's pretty much why people fight you, because they don't see their needs being met. And there is an exercise in this booklet that came from Slow Democracy, and I can pass this around too, okay? So I usually cut this in half and then give everybody half a sheet. But what Slow Democracy found out was that this is based on a study from one of the, I think it's from one of the Ivy Leagues back east, but it's hierarchism. There's a grid. This explains arc divides better than the red and blue, all right? So it goes hierarchism at the top, in other words, hierarchy, right? Collectivism at the bottom, egalitarian, everything's equal. Hierarchical, equal, to individual on this side, to collectivism on that side. And there's archetypes in each of these, okay? So the archetype, one of them, I'm going to start in this corner, is the Mr. Gecko. He's a fictitious character in Wall Street. Greed is good. Okay? So this is about identifying what the needs are of these different archetypes. And I will tell you that America kind of goes like this. Okay? And the needs of this archetype are to have an expert for independent research, balanced discussion guides, objective information. This archetype is the Catholic Church, clarity, closure, results, agreement on issues. Down here in this quadrant is the Mother Joneses. So Mother Jones is like a deliberative process in finding common ground and consensus in building community, versus the libertarians, the Ron Paul types, that respect individual opinions, individual liberties, no false consensus. If these are people's needs, is there anything that you heard that can't be met with either careful dialoguing or messaging? I mean, not really. Okay? So what we learned in this value-based community organizing was we pulled our heads together and we said, who are the main philosophies of Cordova? We could as well be Petoskey, all right? Who are the art conservative liberals? Who are the, we had a substantial native community, a substantial Philippine community. Who are the leaders of those archetypes? Right? Not leader like elected, but leader like, hey, you go and you talk to a lot of people. You're a connector. And the people believe you. And they say, wow, that sounds like a really cool meeting. I think I'll go. So if you talk this meeting up, you'll drag people with you, right? We identified 6 of the leaders of each one of the 6 different philosophical perspectives. We identified people who could go and talk to those people because we wanted people to sign a 1-paragraph letter that we were going to write, put in as an ad, a half-page ad in our paper, inviting people to come to a community meeting on economic diversity. We had to figure it out. Our town had collapsed. And as long as we were all arguing, we were going to stay in a collapse mode. That was pretty clear. So I couldn't, for example, talk to 2 of the people because I was suing them, right? So we identified those 6 people, and ultimately we got everybody to sign on the letter, and that letter came out in the weekly newspaper, and dang if the buzz on the street wasn't, did you see who signed that? It's going to be fireworks. That's going to be a great meeting if all those people show up.
I like it.
So who shows up? 2,500 people in our town? 400 people. Okay? So, I mean, it was fireworks. It was a great meeting. But basically we were all committed to, we have to figure out something here, right? And we all agreed we were tired of fighting. And 20 people ultimately became an ad hoc committee, and that ad hoc committee ultimately became the Copper River Watershed Project, which you can look it up if you want, but it's, let's see, I think it's copperriver.org. And that meeting, I was the founding director, and then I passed it on.
Hey.
And we birthed that value-based community organizing. The 3 questions so you get people, what do we do with 400 people? Well, we didn't do it right away because we had to get ourselves organized. But ultimately, within a couple months, we held another town meeting, and what do you like about our community? What do you want to see different in 20 years? What action steps would you take to make those changes? That's it. 3 questions. It takes you all Saturday to answer them. Because you have 6 people sit around each table, 6 to 8. You have a piece of paper, people write on it what their values are for 3 minutes, then the group discusses it. Then you end up with a list of values, you end up with prioritized values, say how many people said that, and you ultimately end up with a big piece of paper or butcher paper and all these prioritized values. You do the same for vision, you do the same for action, you get prioritized action steps. And there's the first thing that you do, because nobody's going to challenge it. Everybody bought into it. And it sounds really simple, but if you set it up right, it works, okay? So that's value-based community organizing. So, and it's about recruitment building and movement building. I want to talk a little bit about this. Oh, this is for readers. This is a really interesting book. Nature's Trust by Mary Wood. Mary Wood is a law professor at the University of Oregon in Eugene. She challenged her keynote talk, that might be easier for folks, is posted at Public Interest Environmental Law Conference.org. And it's about an hour-long talk. 3,000 law students, science students, she challenged them all. You all want to be change agents? You want to change the world? With environmental law, you want to make the world better? Well, guess what? The whole legal system is broken, okay? And all the laws that we got in the 70s that we thought were going to save us have all been twisted by this twisted system. And so anybody noticed it's not working? You want to use the same set of broken laws and think you're going to save the world? Think again, right? And these students were all like, what? Because they're all studying this, right? And here's one of their professors. And she basically lays out the public trust doctrine as opposed to the corporate, doctrine of rights. Right. So, and public trust is about, this goes all the way back to Roman law, but it's basically that every government, whether it's local, state, or federal, has a fiduciary responsibility to its citizens to protect the basic things that are needed for survival, okay? It was oriented around water at first, and now it's being applied to climate litigation. For example, atmospheric trust litigation. There's one of her students, Mary Wood's students, our children, public trust doctrine as the basis for the atmospheric trust litigation. That's in all 50 states, started with children under age 18. So young children sued the federal government over breach of fiduciary duty that the federal government is not protecting the climate for their generation. This is an amazing thing, okay? And if you go on Our Children's Trust and look this up, there's like 9-year-olds that can explain the problems with the climate, right? All the way on up. And I'm a sort of a recruiter for that because they told me that, Rikki, the kids turn 18, so we constantly need new ones, right? So if you know any outspoken, young, bright, middle school, elementary school, university, or high school students, Our Children's Trust. Anyway, this falls into a lot of what I'm working with them because they're looking for other ways to stop tar sands and fracking, all right, besides climate. And they realize that the National Contingency Plan, which is this blue paper, might be one way. Because guess what? The National Contingency Plan was written in 1968, like I mentioned, okay? The last time it was amended was 1994, before the BP disaster, before the Michigan tar sands disaster, before Arkansas, and it just does not cover tar sands oil and frack oil. It just doesn't. So it is required under law, Oil Pollution Act of 1990, Clean Water Act first amended then, that every shipper of oil has to have a viable contingency plan. You have to say how you're going to pick it up, clean it up. Well, it's impossible for tar sands oil and frac oil. It doesn't cover it. Stuff sinks and the stuff explodes, okay? So one of the things that I am trying to have time here to pursue through our Children's Trust and others is, can we get a preliminary injunction or some legal action to stop all shipments of tar sands oil and frac oil across the nation because of lack of a viable contingency plan? I mean, right? So, okay. So, so do we have a sign-in sheet going around?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because one of the things is I collect a lot of information and I haven't, some of it's going up on okay. I'm in the midst of trying to shift Rikki.com, which has a lot of oil stuff on it, to dispersant ban and to alert. But, for example, I just discovered, I just read an old email, that someone had shared with me that the oil industry is having a conference on how to clean up non-buoyant oil spills in September. I think it's in Detroit. Well, if they're doing this and they don't know how to clean this up, they shouldn't be shipping at all. Okay, it will buy us some time if nothing else. So I will send that kind of stuff out to people, and I'll get it posted eventually. But okay. Let's see. I want to allow time for what your questions are.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I can wait for you though, if you like.
Well, I'm just collecting a little bit of thought here. So I'm thinking that, I mean, everybody here knows that what we're talking about now is such a huge expansion of our oil-based infrastructure and dependency. It's pretty much putting us on a future that is not going to work, right? But it's, on one hand, it's also bringing this stuff up close and personal to all of our, I mean, there's not a person around the United States that's not going to be aware of this if we run this right. And the Vice Media just did a piece in May 16th. It's archived, Vice on HBO, on public health impacts of the, human health impacts of the BP disaster in the Gulf. Well, I've seen the exact same symptoms after the tar sand spill in Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, with Michelle, when I got there. I've seen the exact same things in Arkansas. This is an oil plus solvent, the petrochemicals issue that makes oil much more toxic, and it's everywhere. So in that disaster is opportunity, I think, to reach out to a lot of people. All right, so why don't I just refocus here for a little bit and see what kind of questions folks have at this point. Yes.
Yeah, and this may or may not be pertinent, but I don't know hardly anything about law, you know. It just isn't something that I've had to know, you know. But anyway.
About what?
Well, like our legal system and what the laws are.
Okay.
Anyway, so here's what's going on. We have local politicians, the candidates, or maybe they're incumbents in, like, say, state government or something like that, or even the federal government, representatives and stuff like that. And what they like to do is they like to publicize public meetings, come and meet the candidate, and so you know, they provide crumpets and tea and try to impress the crowd. But they won't be videotaped because they like to talk between, you know, both sides of their mouths. They don't like to be embarrassed if they're ignorant about important situations, and they don't want to offend anybody. So there's a lot of reasons they don't want to be videotaped. Now, we have organizations like, for instance, a local community here that builds itself, actually, as a promoter of a democracy. And so it invites these fat cats over to do their speech to the public, but goes along with that. It says, no, even though this is a public meeting, the public is invited, we're using the community center and all of this stuff, we're saying you can't videotape this and publicize it because we don't want to allow that. They don't want to do that. So I'm thinking that, man, there's just got to be some kind of, I know if it's a public government meeting, video cameras are allowed, but I don't know if they're allowed in a meeting like that, in a community center. I'm thinking I'd like to go there, put up my camera. If they tell me I gotta go, I'll say I'm not bothering anybody. And if they throw me out and arrest me for trespassing, I'd like to be able to challenge that. Is that possible successfully to challenge that? You know? Tough one, huh?
So, no, there's a lot of our First Amendment, this is all illegal law as far as I'm concerned, all this yellow stuff. So it's not going to change unless we start challenging it.
It's what kind of law?
Illegitimate law, illegitimate law. Any law that does not support or endorse government of, for, and by the people, you know, fully transparent, is illegitimate law. So it needs to be changed. But how do you change it in a broken system? So what I would do is research your Open Meeting Act laws. Each, either they're at the local level or they're at the state level. We have shut down meetings based on Open Meeting Act violations of not properly noticed meetings, so I know that can be done. So in your case, that's why we in Cordova started calling our own public meetings, so we wouldn't have, we call them, and then it's in a public space, and public things happen, like videotaping and recording. So I would look at the laws before, and if you're actually going to challenge a law, there's some things I learned in hindsight that would be really good to do, like let people know that you're going to be doing this, right? Mm-hmm. Don't just be a martyr and walk in there and get arrested. Do it for a reason, right? Don't just put people on buses to get in trouble. You know, it's part of a greater strategy here of a plan of changing something. So there might be other ways of doing this as well. For example, We the People Alaska, there's a wethepeoplealaska.org website that's asking people to, asking candidates to take the pledge that they do not support corporations as persons, money, and speech. So that's like, there's an election that's we're gearing up to in the fall, and you know, you get a few of these guys to do it, and pretty soon others want to do it.
Yeah.
And that's like a very public thing. Yeah,
That's good.
This is crazy. We got it.
Yeah.
We got to. These guys have to stand on what they say. Now, having said that, I will say that. 2003, unsettled the corporate right to speak lies. Okay, so what we've got here is, okay, let me, because this is First Amendment stuff, okay? So here we've got political money is speech, which was the basis for opening up the door to spending in elections. When we founded our country, back in whenever, and when I say we, I'm saying it very loosely, okay? That was 4% of the population that actually were represented when they wrote the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right? Mm-hmm. White males with property, right? 96% left out. Okay, so this is about letting money into politics. Commercial money is speech. There was still citizens' referendums, citizens' initiatives, where you didn't like what your legislatures were doing. You could write, get enough signatures and get a citizen law coming up. Instead of having to go through the legislature, coming up, get enough signatures, you get it on the ballot. Right? That's a whole other way. Well, this Buckley, what is this? First National Bank of Boston versus Bilotti was about opening up citizens' initiatives to corporate spending. So a lot of these GMO labeling attacks, a lot of them were citizen initiatives, trying to say, hey, the legislature's not doing it. So we, the citizens, are going to write our own GMO labeling law. And what you see is this very lopsided spending, where it's like $40 million versus, the citizens who have 8,000 or something, right? Okay, so this corporate right not to speak, and the corporate right to not to speak extended, this is about, well, it's being applied in GMO labeling as well right now, where you have food, Vermont's under attack right now, right, by the Monsanto. There's a big attack because Vermont just passed labeling laws statewide for GMO foods. So, boom, here come the corporations consolidated on this, right? Basically, Vermont wanted their nice, lovely dairy products labeled non-GMO. Well, that would imply that everything that wasn't labeled that had GMO foods in it. unless you have the right not to speak. And then you can start pushing that, right? How far does that, so basically that's what GMO is now pushing at. Well, that's labeling laws point blank. You can't incriminate our product by how you label your product. That's kind of what's going on. So leading up to the next attack, okay, then we have the Patriot Act come in, which is about shutting us all down. 2003, that Nike versus Petoskey, that was not settled, but it shows where the corporations are headed. They actually asked for the right to speak lies as a protected form of First Amendment speech. All right?
Something.
So that's where the candidates are headed with this, where they can't be held to this.
I see.
Okay? So, and this is back again, but it's you know, this thing ends in
Reviving our
2013, but it doesn't really. It goes further. What's happening? I just noticed people are packing up.
Well, 4 o'clock, was that supposed to be the time that, or you
Oh.
going after 4?
I thought it was 2:30 to 4:30.
Oh, 4:30, okay, cool. I thought, we saw it in the,
But what is it? What did you
just so, just,
Is it 4?
it's 4 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the other thing starts at 5:30, doesn't it?
Yeah, but we're gonna go 45 minutes beforehand to that flyer.
Okay.
Well, I got you.
Well, are there any, let's just focus this for like another 10 minutes on stuff for this meeting, okay? So any questions relative to, and I heard Jake say something about Corexit and this issues. What's relevant, what do you guys need to know more on tar sands, anything? Health?
Well, did you talk about, I was wondering too, if you talked about like the fact that, yeah, they say Line 5 doesn't carry tar sands, but it does carry byproduct.
Any pipeline in the U.S. can be reconfigured pretty much within a week to
Right.
carry tar sands.
But also the fact that it carries,
Syn crude is what they're saying
Synthetic
it is,
crude.
which is like, it's a lighter crude that comes from Alberta, or it's more processed, or processed tar sands that ends up making it lighter. I don't really understand what it
Syncrude
is.
one of the diluents, actually. It's a diluent.
But it comes from the Alberta, and it's flowing down.
This stuff is going every which way.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, you can talk about that
That's
for a
the thing,
minute.
they don't have to tell you what's in it.
right,
don't tell
and this
you.
is part of our national contingency plan's problem, because when it was created, it was only oil.
Right.
So we need, so up on disbursementban.org, there will be opportunity for people to sign on to support the concepts, because there is an opportunity right now for EPA to open the public comment period, okay? Well, what concepts do we want to address? We want things like, you have to say what it is you've got in your pipeline, for God's sakes, because if it spills, we've got first responders who are out there getting sick. We've got schools, like in Michigan and in Arkansas, where the kids are throwing up, and EPA is using outdated technology and not properly sampling, and,
well, you know, this line actually spilled already, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, on land, but, yeah.
Yeah, but still.
Well,
No, I don't, but still, I'll go right there with you.
Not only just to say,
On fire.
not only just to say what's in the pipe, but be able to verify it, because they
Right.
say that all the time. We don't know if it's true or not.
And then they use the argument that, oh, well, every minute it changes. Well, that's not quite true. These guys have MSDSs, material safety data sheets. They have a library of this. They know what's being shipped.
Whoever,
And-
whoever your tech guy is in your, whoever your tech guy is in your groups, the MSDS is not enough. What's required is the same, what's it called? The same product quality document, which is GC and mass spec.
Is there a library of that? Do they?
Well, the corporation that sends it has it, and the corporation that receives it has it on
Has
the
it.
receiving end.
All right, so we
So
need to know what
the
is
information is out there, and it is available.
not to the public. Yes, okay.
But what's it called?
That's
What's
what we're
the
working on.
acronym for it?
MSDS,
Mass spec gas chromatography, but that's not, I'm not sure what exactly it's, so it's the chemical.
It's a lab test.
It's the lab test of it. The material safety data sheet is only going to tell you what the human health hazards are, what to do with it if it spills, if it's got, Mason dizzy or whatever. And what he's talking about is the actual.
MSPC?
MSDS, material safety data sheet.
Then I
But
got
that's not
it.
good enough.
Mass spec and gas chromatograph.
Mass spec is a mass spectrograph. And-
But there's gotta be a shorter name for that. They don't call it GCMS. They
Yes,
call
that's what
it,
they do call it.
So what depends,
that's the actual chemical makeup of what's in the oil.
that'll tell you like
It's a specific
the quality
fingerprint of what's
the
in that pipe when it leaves
concentration
the
of it.
facility and time of date stamp. And it's run 24/7 because it's a product line. Because when it gets to the buyer is also recording the exact same thing, exact equipment with their time of date stamp, because if it's changed, what happened in between.
Because water can be
Because
injected.
they're
in
Or is that what
interested in
they
the
said it was to
molecules,
begin with?
Yes.
buying
Yes.
molecules.
Right.
That's all they're interested in is the money. So if it changes between the seller and the buyer, and whenever it crosses international lines, there's a seller and a buyer. Whenever it crosses state lines, seller and a buyer.
So that the material data safety sheet tells you what it is generally, but the mass spec and stuff tells you
Genetically.
exactly
Precisely what it is.
what.
Yes. And there is a library of this, and anyway, there. So this, yeah. Okay.
So maybe one quick question about dispersants, if we have time. And I mean, you said, so some of the dispersants are maybe very similar to what's in the diluent, right? So when these pipelines spill and we go to test it later and it shows something like similar to what Corexit is, how do we know the difference? And also, just to put this out there, there was an EPA agent who actually told someone in Minnesota that Corexit was used in the spill, or
Okay,
dispersants were used.
So here's the thing.
After, to clean it up, not
Don't get hung up on the word dispersant, okay?
Okay.
Because EPA has a product schedule. It has dispersants, it has surface washing agents, it has surface coagulating agents, it has bioremediation compounds, and it has miscellaneous, okay? And the dispersant, they're starting to realize that this is a bad word, that the public lights up. So they have been doing this for a very long time though, since Exxon Valdez, where a dispersant with, okay, we had a bioremediation agent, for God's sakes. Everybody was so happy. I look at the ingredients, I go, guys, it's got the same stuff as the Corexit 9527. It's because I have people calling me saying, I'm peeing oil, I'm peeing oil. I'm like, wait, you're telling me your urine is black. Yes, I'm going to die. No, you need to see a doctor. What I'm hearing is that your blood is breaking apart in your body, right? What could be doing that, I wonder? So I go to look at the material safety data sheets and discover 2-butoxyethanol, which lyses human blood cells. I'm like, what? Where is this coming from? And then I discover it's in the bioremediation.
Sounds so nice,
compound.
right?
It's a carrier. And the guys are just being told to spray it. And it's dissolving the rubber O-ring. This stuff is nasty, okay? I'm talking boats in the BP. The water that comes in to cool the engine, it ate the O-rings on the gaskets. It dissolved the neoprene suits of divers who went down. It dissolved the rubber on the mask. It dissolved the O-ring on the divers' tanks. That's what they're putting in as in these products, okay? So now dispersant only happens to be the ones that are allegedly for marine water. Nalco makes them, okay? Nalco makes a lot of them, makes the Corexits. What do I see as a new product on the material, on the NP, National Contingency Plan product schedule? You can just go on that, alphabetical, Corexit. There's a new one called 9580, which lo and behold, is called a surface washing agent, not a dispersant, and lo and behold, it's okay for fresh water. Now, have I looked at the ingredients yet? No.
Okay.
But, so I don't really know what's changed since the Exxon Valdez, for example, when it was only for salt water. What happened there? And it was called a dispersant. Now it's called a surface washing agent. There's some funny stuff here. So what you want to know is what product was used.
Okay.
Product. Because under the current National Contingency Plan, it was really written for maritime oil spills. All right? It really was. So what do you want? It's only dispersants that have to be, where was it used? When was it used? How much was used? not any other product.
Right.
So stuff is getting sprayed willy-nilly at these freshwater spills, I'm pretty sure, because I saw when we pulled into Kalamazoo, when I first got there, you know, on the train, I'm seeing oil spill response right outside the train window, and the blue is like that darker color blue. I mean, it's like really weird blue in the water. And it's like, that's not right. You know, what product got used? Oh, nothing? Because they don't have to report for fresh water. That's another thing we got to change, right? I know. And then you get sick, and then you go to your doctor. And
They
you,
don't know.
well, A, they don't know, but B, they don't even know. You can't say what it was you were exposed to. They're going to say, oh, it looks like you got the cold or flu, you're going to take some Tylenol, right? You say, no, I was actually exposed to an oil spill. Well, what? They don't know. So I want to get to alert, but anyway. Well, no, okay, go ahead.
Just, I got exposed to hydrogen sulfide. It's a long story, so I won't go into it. But Oak
that's
Park, where I
okay.
live, told me it wasn't toxic. I had to do my own research, go to poison control.
Perfect. Say,
Poison control really helps a lot of times.
did they? All right, so just look this up. This is a little, it's not premature for here, actually. Alertproject.org. I'm just starting this because I've been doing this around the country forever. And now I've been going into communities and coaching them on what to expect either after a spill, you know, how you defend yourself. Because it's all going to be lies. You think there's lies now with, you know, oh, we've got the best pipeline in the world, we've got the best spill response, don't worry, trust us. You should see what happens after a spill, okay? Because the spiller is trying to minimize its appearance of damage because they get fined on how much oil spills, they get fined on how many things they kill. Well, if you just burn the carcasses or if you just, you know, sink the oil, and conveniently tar sands oil sinks anyway, so how are you going to know how much spilled? You know, the lies are just unbelievable. And they continue all the way through the civil trial until the dollar is assigned what they're going to have to be liable for. That's why you see all these lovely BP ads. Come down to the Gulf, everything's fine. Those are going to stop the minute that case is over. Okay? They'll just stop. So Alert, okay, is about a hub of trainers that will produce resources for you all to use to be able to, the regional spokes are areas, communities, regions that are at risk from oil exposure, okay? And the idea is to link the communities up here so that we have sort of a chain along these areas and train them to do environmental monitoring, so water quality, air, soil. Train them to do basically community health monitoring, pre-disaster, hopefully pre-disaster, so that because nobody's going to take care of you, as you found out. Once you're sick, it's all about you guys. So do the community surveys that I hope I'm designing right now. Do the, there's a little, I'm going to design a little multi-media, here is environmental health, environmental disease. Here's proper diagnosis and treatment, right? So you put it at the libraries, put it at the schools, so that we get smart on this ordinary cold and flu-like symptom. I had one worker after Exxon Valdez, I did a survey 13 years later. I'm on the phone and I'm rattling through the symptoms. Does he have this? Does he have that? 13 years, okay? He says finally, geez, he says, I thought I had a cold in 1989. I didn't think I would have it for 13 years, right? I mean, you just have this annoying cold, it won't go away, but you can still work. I mean, come on. So, and then the fourth thing is training the doctors, because the doctors are like, this is a relatively, it's not that new. I keep making excuses for the doctors. The real issue is that this is a petrochemical problem, and the doctors don't want to mess with the oil industry. They just don't. So they diagnose you as having chemical illness, and its causation is you're downwind of this oil spill. Well, that doctor is going to be hauled into court by the oil company. So they will tell you that you have asthma or heat stroke, food poisoning, staph infection. I mean, I can't believe all the things I've heard in the Gulf. Anything except chemical illness, right? So the idea is to like bust this open, but we're going to have to do it. We are going to have to do it. And on this website, Disbursement Ban, there's a resource page that has a number of the human health impacts. There's a button for human health. Go there, you'll see some webinars that were designed by fracking communities because the people got sick, they went to their doctors, the doctor said, unlike what's happening in the Gulf, I've had 20 patients with all this same thing. Maybe I should look into fracking. And there's a 6-part webinar and a 10-part webinar. The 6-part one focuses mostly on childbirth, prenatal, and impacts on young children. That's how bad this stuff is. All right? So, but we have to educate ourselves, and then by educating ourselves, we educate our doctors, and it's up to us, people.
Thank you.
Yes.
The DEQ.
Yeah.
We should go.
They
We have to
are,
go get
I
a sound
know.
ready, but
Do you
we'll be.
need
talk
any
to
more
you
things to
soon.
pass out? I'm going to pass them out inside the room.
Oh.
I am legally disabled and is able to prove it.
All right, charge out. I have 6 seats. I have 3 more if anybody wants to come in.